argument is actually put to work was in Areopagus in Acts 17. We can go there and take a peek at that. I'd like if everyone disdained philosophy who hears this, it would be really great. I'm disgusted with it. It has crept into the church. And that's the reason why the church is in such trouble, is we're comparing ourselves to a what? We're protected by the rights of the Declaration of Independence. We're protected, with our rights for religion. Well, that does not talk about who. Religion is the things that follow after your belief, not who you believe in. Who is critical. It's very critical. And if we go to the Areopagus, we're going to see where Paul runs aground. If somebody wants to read that, what do I have up there? 29. Somebody want to read 17:29? It's going to be really familiar. We looked at this over the last couple of weeks in group, but we didn't reference this verse, but we have looked at the concept that the Holy Spirit is bringing in our heart in this verse. So somebody want to read Acts 17:29?
I got it.
Okay.
All right. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, and an image made by human design skill.
Okay.
Is that the right verse?
That's great. That's great. Why doesn't it sound like it works? It's very interesting, isn't it? The images are demons. They're things we worship, silver and gold, but those are whats. Okay? And philosophy will discuss the value and the comparison of things that are what, and discuss and just think about their value. Okay? And so Paul is saying, when you're going to talk about God, it's a who. And when you talk about God's children, it's who. And that who is incredibly important to take you away from philosophy and bring you into belief in a person who loves us and died for us. So when Paul is discussing this, he's in the Areopagus, and those men would be asking him questions, well, you say this, but what about that? What about that? Because in philosophy, with a corporeal, tangible, touchable creature, you want to know about the that, the what, not the who. Okay, so you say compared to what, and that energizes the discussion, and then you defend yourself, and that can go on and on and on and on in philosophical discussions. But when you get to who, okay, and which Paul did in a little further on, well, he says God, so he says, well, you know, he concludes in verse 32 with the attributes of who. He goes into the attributes of who. Somebody want to read 32? Of Acts 18, of Acts 17, anybody?
Acts 32.
17:32.
Now, when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, but others said, "We will hear thee concerning this yet again."
Okay. So when the philosophers heard the attributes of who, and
The
when
resurrected Jesus.
yes, and that conflicted with their what? Okay, because all men die. Philosophers all know that all men die. Anybody who wants to philosophize about life is going to have to admit that you die. But when you bring who into the discussion, you live again. Well, now there's a problem, and we're done talking to you. Okay, so when you want to talk about who you are and who Christ is, now you're in the center. You have burned away, offered up the sacrifice of your life to burning away the dead wood, the old man, the sin in you. When you have accomplished that, your saltiness is real and powerful. And it can now be the central topic for you with the world, which is who you are and who Christ is. If you find yourself in a what discussion and an argument with a philosopher, you have lost your way, and it is highly likely that you don't have the saltiness in you to be in that conversation, because it has broken down into something a philosopher would love to argue with you about. Okay, you guys seeing that? Anybody been involved in arguments like that have broken down? I was in one yesterday. I was beginning to talk about the attributes of my God when my partner at work said, "Give it up." They're not interested. And they weren't interested because they wanted to talk all day about what? But as soon as you bring in who and whose capacity to overcome, the conversation will then be cut off from anyone who is not good soil, who does not understand the value of God and Jesus Christ is not seeking God, and if you remain in that conversation, it's going to break down into a philosophical discussion. Because they will want to talk about what? Okay, it's very simple. It's a very simple process to witness, to testify. But what we're going to find out as we attempt to do it, we're going to find out whether or not we are very salty. In fact, if we don't believe in our saltiness, we're not going to even get into the conversation. If we're not busy about killing the old man, if we're not busy about Romans 12:1, if we don't have a vision of the mercy in which we live in and are in view of, which Christ tried to explain to Nicodemus. Okay? Nicodemus did not know who Jesus was. The only conclusion he had with his fellow Pharisees was that God was with him. But who he was remained obscure. And when Christ talked of spiritual things with Nicodemus in verse 3 of John 3, Nicodemus went into, but what about? Do you remember the what about discussion from John 3:3? We don't have to go there. We just covered it a couple weeks ago. What was the but what about discussion that the philosophical person, Nicodemus, wanted to talk to Christ about? What did he do after Christ said you must be born again? What did he do? What did he say? Do you remember? You guys, come on, I know you remember. What was Nicodemus's retort to Christ?
Was it involvement?
Well, he said, you mean I have to go back in my mother? Is that what you're saying? I have to come out of my mother again? But what about the problem of going back in my mother again? Do you see it? It's a breakdown in understanding because of a lack of belief and the pursuit of that belief in finding out who God is. He came down to philosophy and he had to know what about. What about? And the discussion came away from who. And that's where cerebral people will take you who are not seeking the Lord. The conversation will break down into that. Your saltiness can change that. It can change that. You're not going to go into that conversation, and as you can see, Christ did not go into the conversation, the what about of Nicodemus. Christ stayed where he went to talk all the way through verse 8 about the Holy Spirit and rebirth, another person who enters you, and his will becomes your will. And you have a relationship with somebody. It's not a what. It's not what church you go to or what sacraments you've been involved with. What you do for a living. What's in your wallet. Those are all corporeal-based arguments that are determined, that are presented to bring you away from who? Which, in the person who is killing the old man in them, is going to want to focus on the who, which is Jesus Christ. Okay? So if we expand this, well, what didn't we look at yet? 2 Corinthians 10:5. We got a couple minutes. Somebody want to read that for us? 2 Corinthians 10:5. Do you remember what that was about? Is it 2 Corinthians? Yeah, it is. Second Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. It's a memory verse. You guys, we've talked about it a bunch of times. And lots of people read this and memorize parts of it.
I got you, Jim.
Go ahead.
We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ.
Do you see the way to put down philosophy? Do not engage in philosophical arguments. Go to who? Which we're reluctant to do if the salt in us is not salty. If we haven't killed the old man, we're going to want to talk about careers, cars, guns, money, dope, all the whats. But what about? Okay? And we have to take the thought captive. We take the thoughts captive because we're killing the old man. And we're going to be salty and bring ourselves to the discussion about God, Jesus Christ. And if we don't do that, we are not the salt of the earth. So that's what salt is. We've started looking at it a while back, and I did spend a class or two on it, and I was going to let it go, but it's too critical, and it has a big tie to the gifts, because the gifts challenge the idea of who you are. They challenge it, okay? And we saw that when we read in Corinthians about the foot, okay? Who are you? Well, I'm Christ's foot. He's my head. I'm his foot. That's me in the body. That's who I am. And Romans chapter 1:11, we looked at that many times, and are establishment in the body of Jesus Christ. The who is where we're in, and the who we are in that body is the foot. That's who. That's a person. Look at the way Paul talks about that. We'll close on that verse today. 1 Corinthians 12:15. We'll close on that. There's so much more. I have far more to talk about, but we're out of time. We covered a lot of ground today, but 1 Corinthians 12:15. Somebody want to read that?
Now, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not be for that reason to stop being part of the body.
Okay. How do we know that this is talking about a person?
Because feet can't talk.
Well, not only that, but look at the pronouns.
I am.
Okay. This is who we are. The body, Romans 1:11 says that we are substantial. We become significant in the faith. Who we are is by our gift. It's a critical, and that's why the church has become philosophical when it has moved away from the gifts and gotten into what. And once we go down that road, towards reviving the old man. We stop killing him. We lose our saltiness, and we are not submitting the parts of our body to the fire for purification. We're not. And when we do that, we can't testify to the who anymore. The world is going to want to get us into the philosophical discussion, and we must stay on who